Story time about how I found out my sugar daddy was stalking me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. I signed up to a sugar daddy website last year. I lost my job because of COVID. Just started my own small business and things were not going well. I also helped my parents out with money because I didn't want them to be working during COVID. I signed up to a website and instantly I started getting messages. One man stood out because he was very active and owned several businesses. I told him I didn't want to meet up because I just wasn't going to do that, but also because of COVID. He agreed to have a phone conversation with me and then eventually he offered me $5,000 a month. This was more than enough to help me and my parents out. After that, I was basically his online companion. He would text me and I would text back. We went out to dinner a few times, but because of COVID, we kept our distance. It was truly the perfect scenario for me. Then I noticed that he started to get really clingy. If I didn't text him back right away, he would get upset. One day I got another message from the sugar daddy website. Another man was asking me to go out to dinner twice a week, and he wanted to pay me $1,000 for this. So I said of course. When I told sugar daddy number one that I'd be busy 2 days out of the week, he got really mad and asked me where I lived. I told him I couldn't tell him. That's when my sugar daddy asked me where I lived. I was not about to tell him where I lived. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. I told him I couldn't tell him. He got really upset and offered me $2,000 more, which means that he would be paying me $7,000 a month. Then he said that he didn't want me to be with any other sugar daddies. At this point, I hadn't even told him that I was approached by another sugar daddy. So how did he know that I was talking to another one? I accepted his offer of $7,000 a month, but this only made him even worse. He would call me all the time and ask me where I was, and he would constantly ask me where I lived. He noticed a change in me and that's when he offered to buy me a car, a Mercedes to be exact. I didn't know if I should accept or not because I knew it would make him feel like he had more ownership over me. I told him that I wasn't sure if I should accept the car because of his behavior. Then he said that he would buy me my own apartment. I felt really creeped out, so I decided not to answer his phones or his messages the rest of the night. 2 hours later, I'm laying in bed and I hear a really hard knock at my door. It was him.
Yeah. Whoa. I'm so pretty and he like that. When he get it up, he deep inside that kitty cat. Kitty cat, losing focus just like Teddy Wag. Now where he at? Cause I'm trying to make a baby sad. I know he don't like it when I talk back. Run my mouth like Forrest Gump, but I like it when he talk back. Make my pussy fat when he show me zip it up and beat it.
My sugar daddy starts banging on my front door. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. And he didn't know where I lived. I looked through the peephole and I told him to leave. That's when he shows me a wad of cash. He tells me I can keep it with no strings attached. I said no, and that's when he started calling me names. He started yelling really loud. I was hoping my neighbors would hear and call the cops. In order to calm him down, I opened the door and I let him in. Big mistake. He asked to use my bathroom and that's when I grabbed his phone. I saw on his camera roll that he had pictures and video of me. He'd been following me around for months. Started calling the cops, but that's when he came out of the bathroom. Asked if he could stay over and I said yes. I was so scared. We're supposed to have dinner tonight. Cops said they can't help because he hasn't Part 4. I checked my sugar daddy's cell phone. There were so many pictures and videos of me, which means he had been following me around for months. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. I told him I was sick and he had to sleep on the couch. The following day, he left my apartment really early, so I called the police and I told them everything. They told me they can't do anything because he hasn't physically hurt me yet. My sugar daddy asked me out for dinner and I had to say yes, just to act like everything was normal. At dinner, he acted completely normal, like he hadn't showed up to my apartment the night before and yelled at me. That's when he offered me more money and the new apartment again. I told him I just couldn't accept it. Then I confronted him about the pictures and video on his cell phone. Of course, he denied everything. I asked to see his phone and he handed it to me. And of course, he had deleted all the evidence. So now it's just my word against his. Then he handed me keys to my new car. It's a beautiful car. I don't even know if I should accept it or not. Should I get a restraining order? I don't know what to do. Story time about how I caught my boyfriend cheating on me and I got him arrested. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My boyfriend and I have only been together for 2 months. I'm gonna call him Rex. We live in a pretty small town and everybody knows that Rex is a player. He asked me out and I said yes because I always had a crush on him. After a few dates, he asked me to be his girlfriend. I said yes under the condition that he was totally monogamous. And he said of course. A few weeks into the relationship, I noticed that he was always hiding his phone from me. And whenever he would put his phone on a table, he would flip the screen side down. Of course, this had me on high alert. One night we went out with friends and I made sure that he got super drunk. I took advantage and went through all of his Instagram DMs. And of course, he had been talking to about 30 girls. And I knew some of these girls and they knew that we were together. He had even set up a date with one of the girls for the following day at a bar. And you better believe that I was gonna catch him red-handed. I show up to the bar and I don't see them. I go back to the parking lot and there he is in his car making out with this girl. I knock on the window. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend is in his car making out with another girl. I caught them red-handed. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My boyfriend Rex quickly puts on his shirt, and the other girl puts on her shirt too. I try to open the door, but it's locked. And to my surprise, my boyfriend gets mad at me and asks me what I'm doing there. So of course I say to him, "What are you doing here?" That's when he finally gets out of the car, and he tells the other girl to stay in the car. I told him that he had promised to be monogamous. That's when he said that I was crazy and that he had never promised that, and that he had no intention to be serious with me. Then he said that I made that entire conversation up in my head, and then he told me to leave. I was so shocked, I couldn't believe what he had just said to me. The girl gets out of the car and she actually apologizes to me. And she told me that Rex had told her that he was single. Then Rex lunges at her, starts pulling her hair, and pushes her to the ground. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend lunges at the girl that I just caught him cheating on me with. He starts pulling her hair and pushes her to the ground. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Tried to get him to stop and I pulled his arm. Then he turns around and starts chasing me. I run back into the bar and 2 guys stop him. I called the cops right away and they came and arrested him. Later on that day, he asked me to bail him out and I said no. Everybody knows what he did. The other girl is trying to press charges and my dad wants me to get a restraining order. But I'm still in love with him and I don't want to get him in any more trouble. I even want to take him back, but I know I shouldn't, right?
Story time. Someone tried to murder me on a school trip. So during my senior year, I started talking to this guy that we can call Tyler. And we all had to go on a school trip for a competition. During this, we had to stay in a hotel room and we were all assigned partners. Well, I didn't know this at the time, but I was actually assigned Tyler's ex-girlfriend. We can call her Penny. And when I found out she was his ex, I was like, you know what? Not a big deal. I'm probably just overthinking it, but she had a reputation for being psychotic. And I mean psychotic. Since we were all in close quarters, it didn't take her long to figure out that I was talking to her ex, and she went crazy on me. She basically threatened me by saying that if she ever saw me with him again, I wouldn't be coming home to my family. I still honestly didn't take her that seriously until the next day she saw us kissing, and she left the hotel room to buy throwing knives for when I got back. So when I reached the hotel room that day, she was yelling at me, threatening me, and then she took out one of the knives. Stay tuned for part 2. Part 2 to me almost getting murdered on my school trip. So when Penny took out one of the knives, she literally threw it right at me. Somehow it only managed to land 5 inches from me and I was okay. So I took off running out of the hotel room. I immediately went to our director, and literally because her parents fund most of the band stuff, he straight up couldn't care less. I told my mom, who happened to work with the superintendent's wife, so she told her the whole story and gave my mom his phone number. Let's just say they were suspended and the teacher was fired. She swore up and down that her and Tyler were gonna get back together, but it's been 3 years later and she's still crazy and he still hates her, and I'm still with him. So I guess the moral of the story is, please take it seriously if someone threatens you, especially if it's a crazy ex. Love you guys. Follow my Insta and DM me if you have your own story that you want to share.
Story time about my horrible toxic ex. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My ex and I had been friends for 3 months, and he asked me out. I said yes because I really liked him. But the relationship only lasted 1 month. He started showing red flags really quick. He would constantly try to monopolize my time. If I told him that I couldn't hang out, he would show up to my house randomly without even asking if he could come over. It's like he was checking to see if I was telling the truth or not. Anytime I would be babysitting, he would also show up and ask to hang out. Obviously, I would say no because I was working. He also monitored all of my social media. If I posted anything about BLM, he would get so angry and he wouldn't talk to me. One day I get a text from him saying, "I don't think this is gonna work out anymore." He actually broke up with me over text. I was on a road trip with my family at the time, so I was so distracted and I thought I'd be okay. A few days later, I find out he started dating my best friend. Then he started sending me abusive text messages. My ex started sending me abusive text messages, calling me an SLUT and saying that I was stupid. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Tried to reason with him, but he just wouldn't listen. Of course, I ended up blocking him. A few days later, he showed up at my house. I asked him why he was there. He said he was just riding his bike around. I didn't buy it for 1 second. He made it a habit of just showing up to my house on his bike. Then he started texting me from another number. He was constantly trying to get my attention. Of course, I blocked that number as well. And I get a message from my best friend, who had started dating my ex when we broke up. She asked me if we could hang out and I said yes. Talked for a few hours and we made up. She explained to me how verbally abusive he was with her too, and that he was stalking her as well. But guess what? It gets worse. On top of all of that, he called my sister and started telling her that I was too fat for him, that I was unattractive, and that I didn't bring enough energy into the relationship, and that's why he broke up with me. That's when I called him and we got into a huge fight. Part 3. My ex called my sister and told her that I was too fat for him and that I was unattractive, and that's why he had to break up with me. That's when we got into a huge fight over the phone. Of course, we both said extremely hurtful things. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Like I said, he had been stalking me and sending me abusive text messages. I kept blocking him and he would keep coming back. Then again, he would show up at my house. His excuse was that he was riding his bike around my neighborhood. I told him I needed space. A few days later, I'm hanging out with my friends, and there he is. Shows up totally uninvited. Everyone knew what had happened, but he still tried to talk to me. Of course, I ignored him. A few hours later, I get a ton of notifications from Instagram. Guess what? It's my ex. He started begging for forgiveness. He was trying to justify every single thing he did. There was no excuse for his abusive behavior. Not to me or my best friend. I told him to leave me alone, but he still kept sending the messages. They're starting to get to me. I know I shouldn't want to be with him, but part of me still loves him. He's the first person I've ever fallen in love with.